Rabotai, Boker Oro Mevorach. We're good. Bekiim Bahalacha. We're in volume 3, and today we're on day 102. Just some postscripts from yesterday's shoot. First of all, yesterday we talked a little about the importance of Alenu L'Shabeach, and of course, in a few minutes you cannot do it justice. The value of what this tefillah is. FYI, Rabbi Bitan, live and be well, wrote a sefer actually explaining the value and the meaning of Alenu L'Shabeach. Originally, it was in Lashon HaKodesh, and then later on, a couple of good people, our good friend Rabbi Meir Savdiya and others, got together and they said, Rabbi, write it in English so the people can benefit. So he wrote a beautiful masterpiece. Goes through the whole Alenu L'Shabeach, cover to cover, and it's good reading. It's almost like the Asher Yatzar book that we had. You know, we went through the Asher Yatzar with the stories and all the other items. So he did it with Alenu L'Shabeach. I think maybe we should spend, I guess when we get to it in Bekiim Bahalacha, we'll get to the tefillah. Maybe we'll do like we did Asher Yatzar, a little halacha and then a little. Anyway, in the meantime, don't wait for that. If you can get your hold on the book, get your hands on it, you'll do yourself a big favor. Furthermore, if you heard me over the last couple of shiurim, I've been discussing the mitzvah of kissing the sisiyot. And I'm telling you exactly what the custom is and what the people do. And I always end up telling you that there are some people that you see them kissing the sisiyot after they say Hashem Elokechem Emet. They kiss the sisiyot. And I told you, it's not written down anymore. You don't see it brought down, not by the Ben Wa'ari, not by the Frida, not by the Mishnah Brura, not by the Ben Shai. So my question really was, at the time, and I've been asking the past couple of days, where does this come from? In JF, and so Rabbi Bitan actually sent me a teshuvah yesterday. It's brought down by a great rabbi called Rabbi Abraham Haim Na'ir. And he writes in his sefer, Nahagu, a minhag, but he doesn't say from where. And the Mefarshim is a sefer called Sefer Sisit. He questions, he says, where did Rabbi Haim Na'ir get it from? So Rabbi Bitan has an interesting idea. Maybe, he says, that we know that the Ben Wa'ari said you should hold the sisiyot until udvarav hayim v'kayamim v'ne'emanim v'neharim la'ad, over your eyes, kiss it and drop it. Now, before the Ben Wa'ari came and told us that was a chedush of the Ben Wa'ari. Before he told us that, where would we drop the sisiyot? Emet, Hashem Elokechem Emet. So therefore, the custom was to kiss it because we're finished with the mitzvah. Just like when we take off the tefillin, we kiss the tefillin before we put it away. So before the Ben Wa'ari came, the time that we finished the mitzvah was Hashem Elokechem Emet. Hazak Baruch Shalom Aleichem Shetchem Shalom. Huh? 2 or 4, whatever. Arizal said 4. Shulchan Aruch said 2. That's a machloket between the Mekubalim and the Pashtanim. But whatever it is, however many it is, 2 or 4, they would kiss it in Emet and drop it. Once the Ben Wa'ari came along and said you should hold it until Udvarav Hayim, so now we don't have to kiss it at Emet anymore because now the final point is according to the Mekubalim. So that's a nice answer. Furthermore, somebody mentioned to me, Joe Esses this morning, mentioned to me that he saw in the summer that Rabbi Pinhasi, live and be well, also holds only the 2 sisiyot in front of him during the Kiryat Shema, like Chabad said did, which is like the opinion of Shulchan Aruch. So then, that already is up for grabs if you want to follow the Ari or you want to follow. But when we were young, we learned from Chabad Baruch 4, and that's the way the Ben Ish Chai said. We're not going to go back from doing 4 to 2 now because we saw it, but we continue. Everybody keep with them minhag. And now,
when you kiss the string, you kissing the where they use
very good. I kiss
of you. I see you
yes,
kissing the string.
Yeah, but depends. Yeah, but depends. I kiss both. The truth of the matter, but I think the proper way is to kiss the Yudke Vavke because that's the Shem Hashem. Okay, so חטאתי אביתי פשעתי.
לומדים מתלמידי חכמים את זה, נו?
תבייש אותי בפני כל הקהל.
מחילה. אני מבקש מחילה.
אתה מבקש מחילה. אני מבקש לך. אני כל השוט מבקש.
אני מנסה ללמוד מתלמידי חכמים את זה, נו?
It's like the Wild West over here. How do you teach these guys?
Before it was even more Wild West. That's the way it is here.
Yeah, it's too late. Okay, Rabotai. So now we get to עוד פעם, זה מדבר. the best. All right, Abotai. So now we have a big question of today. The question, of course, is regarding folding the talet on Shabbat. Folding the talet on Shabbat. Now, last time we talked about the importance of folding the talet in general. And you shouldn't leave the talet, unfolded because the kiddie pot come on it, and in the morning you have to shake it out, so on and so forth. The question is, should you shake it on Shabbat? Really, according to Shulchan Aruch, he holds that you should not fold the talet on the creases. That's why you see a lot of people. They take the talet and they fold it the other way against the creases, exactly. And that's the way Shulchan Aruch holds. However, there was an opinion of the Kolbo, and the Kolbo said that he had no problem of folding on the creases. You just can't use like a press, which we don't use anyway. Okay, Maram brings down the Kolbo, but he doesn't hold like the Kolbo. He holds like the other opinions that say only against the creases. However, I want to point out that there was a sefer called Eretz Hayim, if I'm not mistaken, the Bekiim Sitehon. Bekiim Sitehon was a rabbi from Halab, and he documented the different customs that they had in Aram Soba. And he says in Halab, they used to fold the talet on Shabbat on the creases. And he says they followed the opinion of the Kolbo. And even though Maran is against it, he says it seems that there's a minhag before Maran. That means we have a general rule that anytime you have a minhag that precedes Maran's halacha, we follow the minhag. So Halab already, they were living there before Maran's time. And therefore, it seems that they had the custom like the kolbo. And therefore, if you come to our synagogue, for example, on Shabbat, you'll see I fold the talit on the creases, like the minhag. I saw other great rabbis in the community also. I was once in Atere, and I saw Rabbi Eliezer Harari, one of the big Pesukim of the community, folding the talit on the creases. I said that was the minhag of the community, that they followed the kolbo, even though he says over here, mutar lekapel talit b'Shabbat shelo kedei kipudo. Okay, that's the minhag for everybody else. But then he says, v'yesh noagim lekapelo keseder kipudo. And some have the custom to do it on the creases. Even though you could argue that maybe you're preparing, because I'm not going to wear my talit anymore this Shabbat. So basically you're folding. When's the next time you're going to wear the talit? Next Shabbat. People have special talit for Shabbat. So therefore, maybe it's a hakana. Prepare. That's not an issue of hakana. Why? Because when you put the talit away, you have to fold it. You don't leave it unfolded. You have to do something with it. And therefore, when I was folding my talit, you have the ladies in the ladies section, and they see all the things that the men are doing over there. So my wife was watching me fold the talit perfectly on the crease over there. She says, "You always tell me you don't know how to fold the shirts. You don't know how to fold the towel." I said, "You fold the talit perfectly. I never saw somebody fold it so perfectly over there." I said, "I didn't know you were watching." So you have to be careful about that. Now, after you finish folding the talit, our custom is we throw the talit over our shoulder and we kiss the sisiyot before we push it away. That's Chibur mitzvah. Furthermore, we learned from Acham Ovadia that before you put the sisiyot away, it's good to check them at that point before you put them in the kuracha, because the next morning you might be running late and you're not going to be able to check the sisiyot. So the best thing is check it before you put it away. Make sure it's kasher. And put it away in the morning. Put it straight on. You don't have to worry about it. That's another issue. And finally, to finish this section out, the Rav says, Gadol onesh hamivatel mitzvah sisit. Barmenan. The punishment for people that do not do the mitzvah sisit is great. And he quotes a pasuk from Eov that says that God will shake the people and scatter them to the four corners of the earth. We don't end on a bad note. We end on a good note. Hazahir b'mitzvah sisit zoche v'ro'eh penei shechina. Anybody that's careful when it comes to the mitzvah sisit ends up seeing the divine countenance of God. And now we begin a new subject completely. We begin today's talk in Gemara Gittin, page 70. Gemara over there, page 60. The Gemara over there quotes two Pesukim, and these Pesukim contradict each other. One Pesuk comes along and says, Ketov lecha et devarim ha'ele. Ketov, that means you have to write the Torah. Another Pesuk says, Ki alpi ha'devarim ha'ele. Alpi means it's by heart, oral. So the Gemara has to make up your mind. Are you supposed to write the Torah, or are you supposed to say the Torah by heart? One Pasuk says lichtov. One Pasuk says alpeh. This is a great contradiction. So the Gemara says it depends what type of Torah you're talking about. There's two types of Torah. There's Torah shebichtav and Torah shebalpeh. What's Torah shebichtav? The written Torah, the 5 books, or the Tanakh. When it comes to the 24 books of the Tanakh, on the contrary, it's a mitzvah to write it. And not only is it a mitzvah to write it, it's a mitzvah to read it from the actual text itself. When it comes to Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is the Midrash, which is the Talmud, and all the Zohar HaKadosh, etc., well, that's called Torah Sheba'al Peh, there it must not be written. It can only remain Ba'al Peh. So in the olden days, the library was very small, by the way. When you came into the libraries, there was no such thing as Gemara. There was no books. We sat down to learn Gemara. The rabbi wouldn't say, okay, daf, end daf. The rabbi would say, okay, no, where are we holding? Yesterday we learned this. There was no daf bed, gimal, dalad. It wasn't a book. It was all Ba'al Peh. That means when the Jewish people received the Torah and the Midbar, it came down with a scroll. What was in the scroll? Hamisha Amshei Torah. Okay, Yeshua died. They wrote a book, Yeshua. They added. Now you had a 6th book. And then after Yeshua, they added the book Shofetim. They added another book. And then you had Shemuel Aleph, and then Shemuel Bet, and then Melachim Aleph, and Melachim, etc., until Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther is the last book of the Tanakh. That's number 24. After Megillat Esther, nobody could come along now and say, oh, we want to write a new book. For example, Megillat Hanukkah. And Megillat Hanukkah. There's Midrashim on Hanukkah, but that's only 24 books. And that's the only books that were written. So if you went to most libraries, all you would see was a Tanakh. And that's it. Ifwa Gemara, Bamawah. The Gemara was in the brains of these students. So you're going to ask me a question. If they were in the desert, how they could remember the Gemara? But it's 2,800 pages. And the Gemara, the Hakamim tells us in the olden days it was much bigger. It says the Gemara of Avraham Abinu, of Avodah Zarah, which is one Gemara, had 400 chapters. We don't have 400 chapters in Gemara Avodah Zarah. So how could they remember such a thing? So Rabbeinu Ari says that they used to drink from the well of Miriam. The well of Miriam was special water. Whoever drank it, their brains became like magnets. And everything they heard, they remembered. That's the first water that we call smart water. It made them smart. And Rabbeinu Ari actually knew where it was. When he was learning with his student of Chaim Vital, Chaim Vital couldn't remember. Every day, Rabbeinu Ari teaching him, his Hakam. It's like a mother nursing a child. The child can't swallow the milk fast enough, and the mother's putting more milk. I need time to digest. So I see you have a problem remembering. Come with me. Took him on a boat in the Kinneret. He looked. He says, here's the Be'er Miriam. He took out a glass of water. He made a shakol. Chaim Vital says from that day he didn't forget any of his learning. The Hakamim say that there's a tradition that every Motzei Shabbat, the well of Miriam comes around and it goes into the wells of the world. Therefore, they say Motzei Shabbat, you should drink some water from the well. Maybe you get lucky, maybe you hit lotto, maybe you get from the well of Miriam, and this will be good for your memory. In any event, we have a problem now. Because if you come to this library, now we're in Surfside, we're now Florida studios. If you come to this beautiful library of the Rabbi Elmaleh, you see what we are. There's all Gemariot over here. All Torah Sheba'al Peh. What's going on? The Gemara says, Asur, Torah Sheba'al Peh, Al Pi HaDebarim. How could they write it? So that she comes along and explains. He said that what was happening was that the people were forgetting exactly. And they were starting to forget. Why did they forget? Because of Galut. The Jews started to be dispersed all over the world. And we know that, once a person gets spread out of the world, they're not in the right head. They cannot concentrate. And if what was happening to Torah Sheba'al Peh, they were forgetting it. So the rabbis had to make a rule. They said, you know what? Bitulo zehu kiyumo. That if you're not going to break this rule, you're not going to have a Torah anymore. Meaning there's two options. Either we're not going to write the Torah. Torah says it has to be Ba'al Peh. What's going to end up happening in a couple of years? And Torah. So the Hakamim had to come along and say the following. Et la'asot laHashem eferu toratecha. That sometimes you have to break the law to keep the law. Bitulo zeu kiyumo. And therefore, what did they say? They're going to write it down. And that's, by the way, just like they did something else. In the olden days, when you went to a yeshiva, everybody was standing. There were no chairs in the yeshiva. Why? The Torah was given standing. Me'omed. When we came to Har Sinai, the Torah was given the standing. Kavod. And therefore, you went to yeshiva, you stood from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, till the end of second Seder, 10 hours a day, then come back night Seder, standing. There's no such thing. If in the olden days, we would come to Bekiim Bahalacha, you'd have stender. Everybody would stand in front of a stender and stand. So then what happened? Rabban Gamliel realized that the people were getting weak. They couldn't stand there the whole day. So what was happening? They can't learn. If you can tell me I can only stand when I'm learning, I can't learn. So what did he do? He made a takana. From now on, we're able to sit, and that's what we have learning miyoshev today. You're going to ask me a question. So why did they call it a yeshiva in the olden days? Today we call it a yeshiva. They come, they sit. But in the olden days, what did they call it? Amidah? No, the reason why they called it a yeshiva is because the pasuk says in Tehillim, Torat Adonai Timima Meshivat Nafesh. The Torah is Meshivat Nafesh. It gives a person peace of mind. Torah is Miyashevet Da'ato Shel Adam. It gives a person certain tranquility, a certain amount of peace. So therefore, they called it a yeshiva even when they were standing. Now we get to this issue over here. The Gemara says in Yomah. What page is it in Yomah? 68. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur would read. Where would he read? He would read from Parashat Aharemot. After he finished Parashat Aharemot, he had a Sefer Torah in his hand. He would make Gililah. Right away, he would turn and he would read the Parashat Emor. After he finished Parashat Emor, so now he has to get to Parashat Pinehas. However, from Emor to Pinehas, it's going to take a long time for him to turn. So what did he do? He read it Ba'al Peh. He read it by heart. So then again, he had the Sefer Torah. He starts Haremot. Right after Haremot, Emor is right there. He turns it very quickly. Emor, he still continues to read. After that, he says, Rabotai, I'm now going to read Ba'al Peh. So the Gemara, the Rishonim have a question. What do you mean? We just learned in the Gemara Gittin, Torah Shebichtav has to be read from the Sefer. You're not allowed to read Torah Shebichtav by heart. So then, how is the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, no less? That's the first Avirah of the year. The first Avirah is reading Torah Shebichtav orally. So the Rishonim come along and say that really, and this is a big hadush. Tosafot says the same thing. Really, it's not an isur. It's a recommendation. And since they have a reason, in this case over here, they waived the law. What was the reason they had over here? Torah Sibur. You have you have a million people in the Bet HaMikdash. They're all waiting. Now, if the Kohen Gadol is going to have to turn and turn, it takes a couple of minutes, maybe even if it takes 30 seconds. But to keep the Sibur waiting for 30 seconds, we call that Torah Sibur. So therefore, Tosafot says not to keep the Sibur encumbered, that they have to be waiting and doing nothing. Therefore, it's better for the Kohen Gadol to read it Ba'al Peh, and you don't have to be concerned about this law. What sounds to me like that these opinions over here, they actually hold that this law that says you have to read the Torah Shebichtav from a book and you cannot read it by heart, it's not absolute. It's a nice thing. But if you can't do it, it sounds like it's not something that's critical. Again, when we read that Gemara Gittin, the Gemara said two things. Number one, Torah Shebichtav has to be written. Number two, you can only read the Torah Shebichtav from the book. That's why you have a guy who knows, he has a great memory. He wants to sit down, he wants to start reading Ba'al Peh. Not loud. Get a sefer. No, but I know it by heart. Now, don't ask me, what do you mean, Rabbi? Every day we say, as Yashir by heart. It's Torah Shebichtav, by Yosha. Torah Shebichtav, Shema. These are great questions. We're going to get to it. There are a lot of Pesukim in the Torah. We bless our children on Friday night. You see, Mechai, Rivka, Ephraim, V'chim, Nasher. We bless our children with Kat Kohanim. Yibarech Hashem Yishmenecha. We go to a wedding. The rabbis put their hands on the Hatam V'kala. Yibarech Hashem Yishmenecha. Yibarech Hashem Panav V'necha. It's Ba'al Peh. But every time now you're going to want to quote a Pasuk. I'm giving you a shiur. I want to quote a Pasuk. Pasuk. Bring me Chumash. What's the pasuk? I can't say it. Bring me the pasuk. Bring me the Chumash. Now until these guys find the Chumash, the wrong one. Okay, finally we get the right one. Okay, what pasuk you looking for? Vayomer Adonai Moshe Lemor. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, take it back. That's what you give me. You don't know Ba'al Peh? Torah Shebichtav. You can't read it by heart. I needed a pasuk. Okay, bring it to me back. What does it say over there? Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hakam. You said Shema every single day 4 times. You don't know Ba'al Peh? I know it Ba'al Peh. So we're going to have to discuss what do we do with all those other Pesukim, which is a great question. But for today, we need to analyze Tosafot, because Tosafot said there's no problem when it comes to saying things Ba'al Peh. That's why anytime you have a reason, it's okay to forget about it. And therefore, in the Bet HaMikdash, they had a reason. What was the reason they had? Torah Sibur. What was the Torah Sibur? The Kohen Gadol says, what? I'm going to start turning the Sefer Torah. By the way, you learn a lesson from over here. A lot of times what happens, the Rosh Chodesh, and the Misader forgets to turn the Sefer Torah from the Parashat Shavua to Rosh Chodesh. Now the Kahal takes out the Torah, they put it on the table. Too late, we took it out. Now you cannot go back and take another Sefer Torah. Once you take the Sefer Torah out, that's the one you have to use. What happens now? They have to roll it. Now they're in Bereshit. They got to go all the way to Parashat Pinchas to Parashat Rosh Chodesh. It takes 10 minutes. Meanwhile, what's the Sibur doing? Nothing. Torah Sibur. And by the way, it's much closer Parashat Emor to Parashat Pinchas. It's right there. And still we told the Kohen Gadol on Kippur. Baal Peh. I guarantee you, nobody in the Beit HaMikdash, if the Kohen would take 30 seconds to turn it, nobody's going to start screaming, hey, Torah Tzibur. A guy who has the guts to yell at the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, he doesn't deserve to live that year. So therefore, we know he's not going to yell. But it's not about the people yelling or not yelling. The Torah is concerned about inconveniencing the Tzibur. So we have to be very, very particular. Even a small amount of time that the Tzibur has to just sit and do nothing is already considered an inconvenience. So Tosafot says, we're not concerned about this law. It's not absolute. Rav Chida doesn't accept this. Rav Chida says, what do you mean it's not absolute? This is a law that's a halacha, and it sounds like it's not only absolute, but whoever is not careful is making isur, and it could be isur deoraita. So he doesn't understand how Tosafot can come along and say, listen, we try to do it. If you can't do it, it's okay. What do you mean? It's not so. And he proves it. He says when the Gemara says there were certain rabbis that they brought a book. What was the book that they brought? Rabbi Yohanan and Rish Lakish, they were learning one time, maybe on Shabbat, they were learning Midrash, Agadah, and they had a book. So they told him, Hacham, Torah Sheba'al Peh, what's the book? So he said, Et la'asot laHashem heferu Toratecha, which means what? When there's a time for God, you're able to nullify the Torah. Which sounds like what? They're nullifying it. It sounds like it's an item, but sometimes you have no choice, you have to nullify it. According to Tosafot, you're not nullifying it. It sounds like it's not such a big deal. But from the Rav Chida, it sounds like it's a very big deal. You need a heter to break this federal law. So therefore, Rav Chida says a chidush. He bases on the rabbi called the Torah Hayim. Let me explain to you like this. Really, it's a strict halacha. And really, one should not read Pesukim that are in the Torah shebichtav by heart. And one should really, Torah Sheba'al Peh should be by heart. That's for sure. And that's why we have two Pesukim. One Pesuk is Al Pi Devarim, Al Pi. Al Pi is Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the other Pesuk says, Lichtov, to write. But what? Sometimes we have no choice. And therefore we have to be lenient. However, when the Hakamim made this law originally, they knew the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is going to have to turn the Sefer Torah, so they never had that in mind when they originally made the law. Listen what I'm saying? Which means there's certain things that when they made the law, they wanted the halakha to apply. And then they had to override it later on. When they made the law initially, they had never intention for the Kohen Gadol, because that they knew going in, the Kohen Gadol is not going to be matriach the Sibur. So therefore, there's two halachot. Hakamim sat down in the meeting, assuming that it's Rabbanan. There's a big mahloket if this law is with Rabbanan or the Oraita. We're going to hold Rav Chida, the Kapa'im, it's the Rabbanan. So let me explain to you what happened. The rabbi sat down in a meeting like this. Rabotai, we want to institute a new law. Torah shebichtav must be written, and you must read it from the book. Torah sheba'al peh has to be by heart. You're not allowed to write it. They voted. Unanimous. Okay. Before we vote. Before we make the law, we want to grandfather in today an exception. Means before they even voted, they grandfathered in an exception. What was the exception? Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So that never even applied at all. Now, they didn't grandfather in other exceptions except that. Later on, when the rabbis saw that we couldn't live according to this rule anymore, you're going to tell people, come to a Gemara class, no books. We can't remember anything. Or you're going to come to a Chumash class, and you can only quote the Pesukim from the book. Not everybody has books, so therefore we cannot study Chumash. So the rabbis then came along and had to override their ruling. So there's two rules. There's the grandfather, and then there's the overriding. Kohen Gadol was grandfathered in from the beginning. The other halachot that we're going to learn, the rabbis needed to make exceptions. Now, there is a sefer called Sefer HaYire'im. Who is Sefer HaYire'im? There was a rabbi of the earlier generation of the Rishonim. His name was Rabbi Eliezer Memetz. He was one of the Baalei Tosafot. They used to nickname him the Re'em. Rabbi Eliezer Memetz. Acham Baruch used to nickname me the Re'em also, Rabbi Eliyahu Mansour, but that's a different story. This is Rabbi Eliezer Memetz. He wrote Sefer Yire'im. What is the Sefer Yire'im? It's a book on the Taryag Mitzvot. Now, when we talk about Taryag Mitzvot, what's the first book we think of? Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch, that's the book we did. We studied in this synagogue. We studied many mitzvot from the Sefer HaChinuch. However, there are many other books of great rabbis that they also wrote on the Taryag Mitzvot. And one of the main ones is called Sefer Yire'im. And he says over there that this law of writing the Torah down and reading it from a book and not reading Torah Sheba'al Peh, from a book, only by heart, it's midrabanan. We quoted Pesukim. Those Pesukim are called asmachta. Yesterday I heard the rabbi explaining to the people what asmachta is. Asmachta meaning it's a remez. It's not actually a pasuk to be taken, literally. However, there's another rabbi. There was another rabbi called Rabbi Elazar Azkari. Now, who was Rabbi Elazar Azkari? He wrote a sefer called Sefer Haredim. Now, the Sefer Haredim, it was also a book on the Taryag Mitzvot. Rabbi Elazar Azkari lived in the 1600s, the time of Rabbeinu Ari, in Sfat. It's a very important sefer. Actually, we started giving shi'urim, if you remember, on Sefer Haredim. We gave about 30 or 40 shi'urim, and then COVID came and whatever happened. It's a very important sefer to learn why. Because in the Sefer HaChinuch, he gives you the 613 mitzvot straight. But there's a lot of other items that he doesn't talk about. Mitzvot, the Rabbanan, and different practices. The Haredim gives you all the items and all the details. So much so, I found there's a Mishnah Berurah in Siman Kuf Nun Vav. Just so you know about these rabbis, how important it is, and how important it is to study the Sefarim. In Siman Kuf Nun Vav, at the end, the Mishnah Berurah in Daled. So the Mishnah Berurah over here is discussing different mitzvot and different practices that a person should do every single day, and different books that a person should learn. So he comes along and he writes, and I quote, look at this, this is one of the biggest Mishnah Berurahs in the book over here. At the end he says, Ve'od yesh harbe beharbe, there's many more halachot, shelo huva b'Shulchan Aruch. That's not written in Shulchan Aruch. She says, if you think you're just going to read Shulchan Aruch and you're going to know everything, you're not going to know everything. There's a lot of other books. V'nimsa'im b'sifrei moneh ha-mitzvot. You're going to have to read the books of those that count the mitzvot. HaRambam, HaSamag, V'achinuch, Ubiyoter b'Sefer Haredim. So the main book is Sefer Haredim, ki hu kibetz mikol harishonim hakodmim. He collected all the opinions of the earlier rabbis, b'mitzvot hanohagot l'maaseh b'zman hazeh. V'nachon me'od she'ilmod otam kol adam. Mishnah Berurah says, everybody has to learn these books. V'yeh baki b'hem. That. So therefore, this is an item that we shouldn't take for granted. Now, the Sefer Haredim, Rabbi Elazar Azkari, he actually writes that this is a law from the Torah. So he holds it's mitzvah deoraita to write the Torah shebichtav in a book and not to say Torah sheba'al peh from a sefer. They have to say it by heart. So it comes out with a big mahloket. Is this deoraita? Is the Rabbanan? Yere'im says the Rabbanan. Haredim says the Oraita. The Maaseh, we hold from Rav Chidan the Kafaim that it's the Rabbanan. Now there was another great rabbi from Turkey. He lived in the 1700s. They nicknamed him the Yareyah, the moon. Who was he? He was Rabbi Hazan, but they called him Yosef Rafael Hazan. He was the grandfather of Rav Chaim Halachi, exactly. He was the chief rabbi in Izmir. He was a gaon. There was nobody like him. And when he, at the end of his life, they tell a story about this rabbi, Rabbi Hazan. He was a gaon. He wrote a sefer called Hakrei Lev. That's the sefer we're going to quote now, Hakrei Lev. Shoot Hakrei Lev. Chama always would quote Hakrei Lev. At the end of his life, he had a hard time eating. He had very, very strict diet because his digestion wasn't good, and therefore he had such thing. And he said, "I'm very, very happy, Baruch Hashem, that at the end of my life, the only thing that doesn't work is the food, because that doesn't affect my learning. My eyes, Baruch Hashem," he says, "are still perfect." He says, "Look how old I am, and I still don't need glasses. And therefore, as long as I can read Torah, it doesn't bother me. All the other items as well." So he was a gaon from Hakme, Turkey, and he writes in Hakrei Lev that anyone who ignores this halacha, and even if he reads one word by heart, asur. Wow. So he took this halacha very, very seriously. He said, not only that, he says, you won't get credit for the Torah that you learned. So if a person, let's say, studied Torah Shebichtav, and he read it by heart, he says, maybe they won't punish you. Maybe they won't punish you. But you're not going to get any credit for that learning. Read it inside. He writes, anyone who ignores these rules is not considered a sinner. I mean, he's not considered a poshaya, and he will not be punished for it. Okay, Baruch Hashem. However, since he is studying it in the incorrect fashion, he will not be credited for the mitzvah that he studied. Wow. Moreover, he said, these rules apply even to a single word. So he took it strict. And it was forbidden to say even a single word from the written Torah without reading it from a written text. And it's forbidden to write down a single word from the oral Torah as well. And therefore, he ruled that while reading the Torah, it is. So we have a question. It comes out according to this opinion, you can't even read one word. Not everybody agreed with him. Some rabbis said, let's say you're reading the Sefer Torah and there's one word missing. Okay, maybe not in the Sibur. Let's say you're learning. In the old days, they used to learn from scrolls. He's reading and there's one word missing. So you can say it. By the way, we do that in Megillat Esther. In Megillat Esther, the halakha says, if a word is missing, the Baal Koreh is able to read it by heart. And the Kahal fulfills the obligation. It happened one year when I was reading Megillat Esther in my Megillah. I had a beautiful Megillah, Mehudat, but the Sofer forgot a word. He forgot a word. What was the word? I think Batit Halhal Hamalka. That word was missed. A big word. Batit Halhal Hamalka, I missed it. So I get to the word over there. Where is it? But I know the word. I know the Megillat Esther. So I read it Baal Peh. The Kahal didn't know I read it Baal Peh. So I'm looking inside. The halakha says you can read up to the majority of the Megillat Esther Baal Peh, and it's okay. According to Rabbi Hakrei Lev, it sounds like even one word, you're going to have a problem. So we have to see how he learns that halakha, because Shulchan Aruch tells us clearly it's permissible to read it even outside of the text, unless he had a different opinion. In any event, he ruled that even one word is forbidden to recite by heart. Moreover, he ruled that the prohibition applies even when someone is not performing the public Torah reading. So not only when the guy's reading it b'sibur, even when he's reading it by as learning. In any event, this opens up a very, very big topic that we're going to discuss the next couple of days: the law of reading Tanakh from a sefer and Torah Sheba'al Peh, saying it. But when do we have the exceptions, and what exactly is going to be acceptable or not? We'll stop over here. Baruch Adonai Olam.
The wasn't qualified. It was time to see. He wasn't qualified to read it.